Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. I am Valerie Cacho, Dr. Val. I go by sort of online, and I'm an integrative sleep medicine physician with an office based in Hawaii and California. But I also have an online educational company called Sleepbzzz, where I'm really passionate about teaching women, especially women going through perimenopause and menopause, how they can improve their sleep. Because there's a lot of women who have a hard time sleeping during this time. Some of the data shows 50 to 60% of women struggle with sleep in midlife. So I feel like that's way, way, way too many women. And there's just a lot of good tools and treatment options available. And I feel like they just don't know about it. And the big thing too is, menopause and sleep as a whole, we weren't really taught about it in medical school. So we took like some of the sleep education research. It's just like 2 hours we learn about sleep and maybe if we're lucky 2 hours about menopause. So then sort of combining those two, you go to your doctor and you're like, a woman and maybe you're turning 50 and it's like, I can't sleep. And guess what? They'll probably give you a sleeping pill, which, maybe can work. But, the sort of patients that I see in my practice, they've tried all the pills available and they still can't sleep. So there's just something to tell you about that. Sometimes people are looking for the stronger pill or the better one. And I'm like, well, if you tried all of the things that are like FDA approved, and even supplements and even cannabis and still have a hard time sleeping, well, there's other things that we should really look at. So that's sort of what I do.
Where do you start in kind of this sleep journey if someone's having that those issues and they're in that era of their life?
Yeah, that's a good question. And the first question I always ask, it's, well, what's bothering you the most? And then taking a look at sort of the decision tree. Do you have a hard time either falling asleep or is it staying asleep? Because the causes can vary. And sometimes it's both. And then we really have to sort of like dig through the weeds to figure out what's going on. So I do have a visual here. I can share it with you. And it's a little bit of a wheel. So, which one in parentheses S do you have? Because there's multiple sleep disruptors as a woman goes through perimenopause, menopause, or even midlife. So if we start at the top, hot flashes, night sweats. Okay, so this happens, right? If you don't know, then you probably aren't having them because typically people who have it, can wake up from a deep sleep. Sometimes you're sweating where you have to actually change your clothes, change your bed sheets because you're just drenched. And this has to do with fluctuations in hormone levels, specifically estrogen. Yeah, so that one's pretty big. And sort of an issue with this is there was a big study, the women's health sort of study, women's health initiative that said hormone replacement was bad because, some people had an increased risk of things like heart attack or stroke. But when you actually reanalyze the data, it wasn't that much of an increase. And so a lot of women, even when I was in training, we were told, if someone had high blood pressure, then they probably shouldn't be on hormone replacement therapy. But hormone replacement therapy, actually taking hormones as your levels are starting to decline, is one of the best ways to control the hot flashes and night sweats. And it doesn't mean you have to be on these medications forever and ever, but for God's sake, right? You got to help someone be able to sleep because if you don't sleep well, it definitely can affect your mood. So,
well, and I'm assuming
women in general, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm assuming that hot flashes and night sweats also correlates to anxiety and depression because if you're seeing a big hormone dip, it's going to I mean, my wife gets anxiety and, I see her and I'm like, how can I help you? Cause it's nighttime. I don't know what to do, and like that's where I could see that kind of kicking in and being like, oh no, like.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the anticipation of a hot flash night sweat to come about. And that can cause some anxiety, right? I used to think of it like when I worked in a hospital and I used to work nights and, the ER would be really quiet, like everything was sort of slow and I would have the opportunity to take a nap. But then you never know when that pager is going to go off. So it's like you're sort of sleeping with one eye open, sort of like if you have a newborn at home, right? Yes. Okay, you got him down, he's sleeping, you just fed him, burped him, changed his diaper. Okay, everything is good. But maybe because, last night or the night before, he woke up 5 times. So you're just like, oh, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so that anxiety, that apprehension of, another hot flash is going to come. And that can really stimulate some anxiety and depression. But women as a whole have higher rates of mental health concerns as opposed to men. And guess what? It doesn't get better as we go through that hormonal change. So yeah, hot flashes and anxiety, depression are things that I look for. And then, I'm a sleep doctor. So I look for I look for sleep disturbances. So believe it or not, I mean, circadian rhythm issues are pretty big. I see a lot of people who come in referred for insomnia, and they are trying to go to sleep at 9, or maybe they're trying to go to sleep at 10 p.m. But guess what? On the weekends, they don't go to bed until after midnight, or if they're on vacation, right? Maybe they stay up till like 2 or 3. And what is that? Well, it's a night owl trying to live a day person's life, right? And so it can be really, really frustrating. And there's actually a certain percentage of the population, maybe 10, 15%, where, if you go, it actually starts in around puberty. And then you go through college and it's great because you can take like the late classes, right? You can sleep until 10, have lunch and then go to class at 2, or even like, there's 6 to 9 classes as well. And then guess what? Once you have your 8 to 4, 9 to 5 job, it's pretty awful. And then you're asking your doctor, and your doctor will say, okay, here's a sleeping pill. But actually, what you really need to do is know that your internal clock is shifted, you're a night owl, and then learn how to shift your clock back. So I sort of like that one because it's an easy fix where I'm like, oh, okay, I know why you're so frustrated. Your body just isn't ready to go to sleep. It's like you're living in a different time zone. So
Yeah.
using light in the morning helps. Yeah.
So for that one, do you just go through the process of like you're gonna keep yourself awake for a really long period of time, and you have to fall asleep at like 8 or 9 o'clock the next night? And
Typically no, because the people I work with have jobs. I mean, unless it's on the weekend. So I would say I have had that recommendation, and that does work, where you just slowly, keep yourself up. Typically for students in the summertime, when they don't have anything to do, right? You can just sort of delay until you're asleep, until you're on the next cycle. But for, busy adults, busy parents who are working and taking care of their family, doesn't work so well. So what I encourage them to do is just get more sunlight in the morning time. And actually, after about 2 weeks, that morning light will tell your brain, right? It's got to hit your eyeballs, so you can't wear dark shades. If you can go for a walk in the morning, 10, 15 minutes, depending on where you live, right? You need at least 10,000 lux. So there's an app that you can download called Light Meter. And making sure you get enough light in the morning will actually help shift your clock to help you fall asleep earlier at night.
wow.
Yeah. So behavioral patterns also play a role. You really want to avoid your screens prior to go to bedtime. But yeah, getting light in the morning is the best way to shift your clock back. So our circadian rhythm is based on light, darkness, and melatonin. So light at the right time, melatonin sort of like a mixed bag, because in the US it's not regulated as a medication. It's sort of like a food substance. So that's give or take, even depending on what brand you buy. So if you can go outside, go for a walk, that's helpful. I used to work in a building where there was no windows, right? And so now I have a window, and so I'm happy.
So then we kind of move on to the obstructive sleep apnea.
Yeah, so that is really big as we get older. And honestly, there's a lot of gender bias in medicine, sleep medicine as well. So a person can, a person, say male or female, can go into their doctor and say they're fatigued, maybe they snore. And if you're a male, your doctor is more likely than not to get you a sleep study, order a sleep study. If you're a woman and overweight or obese, and you say you're tired, guess what? Your doctor's going to say, okay, let's check your blood work for your thyroid, or, tell me about your mood, and diagnose you with depression, and maybe give you an antidepressant or send you to a therapist. And some of the research shows that 90 to 98% of women, like, this happens. So it's really shocking and almost breaks my heart. But yeah, women don't present the same as men. So just like, men can have a heart attack, and it could be like, the elephant sitting on their chest, sweating, pain radiating to the arm. When I used to work in the hospital, I've seen women who are nauseous and dizzy, and they're having an acute heart attack. So the symptoms can be subtle, but it doesn't mean that, we shouldn't order the same type of testing. So yeah, obstructive sleep apnea is very common for adults. 1 in 5 have it, especially as we get older and as women go through menopause. The rates can like double or even triple.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's something, and that can keep you from falling asleep, right? So like the circadian rhythm, anxiety, depression, that can keep you from falling asleep. Obstructive sleep apnea can keep you from staying asleep, because it only happens when you actually are asleep and your muscles relax and the tongue sort of chokes you. Yeah. Along with that is waking up to urinate. So, that could be from sleep apnea, could also be from drinking a lot of water, but also as women get older, we lose estrogen and it could affect the lining of your urethra. And so that's the tube that connects the bladder to allow you to pee. And so disruptions of that can also be sleep disruptive. And then environment, right? So, if we're getting older, guess what? Probably our partner's getting older. And maybe he or she are developing sleep apnea, or maybe they're snoring, right? Or maybe you live in a big city and there's just a lot of light pollution coming through your window, right? Or a lot of noise. And that can play a role too. And sometimes that's something we know, but we don't always think about how our environment plays a role, which, it's good that if there's tech available, just drown out the white noise. I mean, the noise, drown out the light. That'd be really helpful. Insomnia, right? So insomnia is having a hard time falling asleep, staying asleep, can be due to some of these other things, or can be its own condition. Some people, for whatever reason, have a difficulty time sleeping and they get very anxious. There wasn't a specific trigger. Sometimes it's health problems, sometimes it's having a young kid, and then 20 years later, they still have a hard time sleeping because they never were able to get back on track. So part of what I like to do is, talk about how can we boost your confidence in your ability to fall back asleep. So with insomnia, something called cognitive behavioral therapy really works. It takes a look at your thoughts, actions, and behaviors in and around sleep to help you be able to relax better at night. And then ruminating thoughts. A very common reason why people have a hard time falling asleep is because, we don't turn our brains off, or we don't know how to turn our brains off. And a good analogy to this is like, a plane landing, right? When the pilot's landing the plane, you don't just go vroom down. So it's almost like we go through life and we're moving from one moment to the next, right? We wake up, we get ready, we're rushing off to work, hopefully we're grabbing some food. If not, we just stick something in the microwave, meeting after meeting after meeting, lunch, gobble our food, maybe eating at our desk, going home, taking care of the kids, going to sleep, hanging out on our phone, putting our head down. And then we're like, wait, okay, well, I'm not asleep yet.
Yeah.
Because sleep happens when your brain waves slow down. So are you allowing your brain wave to slow down? Or are you just sort of like making the plane dip down deep and trying to think, okay, it's
So
time to go to sleep?
what do
Yeah.
you recommend for people who they wake up to urinate and then they have the ruminating thoughts?
Yeah. So I know there's so many things. I'm like, where can I start? So I would say what caused you to wake up to urinate? Meaning, if you have an underlying sleep apnea condition, treat that. If you have an underlying bladder issue, treat that. If you're drinking too much water, treat that. Yeah, because typically your body can hold your urine throughout the night unless there's something wrong. Some people who have insomnia just are light sleepers, and since they're already awake, they're getting up to use the restroom. So sometimes it can be hard to differentiate, and so self-awareness is really helpful. But are you waking up because your bladder is full, or are you just going to the bathroom because you're already awake and you might as well? So differentiating between that. And then the second question or second part was, okay, now my mind is racing. What do I do? And honestly, this is something where you get to decide what you do. So I like to think of mind body practices as the best treatment for middle of the night awakenings. And, they're basically exercises to help calm your mind and body down, right? I have a whole list of things that you can do. I think the fastest is breathing. So if you slow down your breathing to at least a respiratory rate of 6 breaths per minute or less, that can stimulate the relaxation response. So we have our stress response and we have the relaxation response. And if we get up in the middle of the night, guess what? We tend to catastrophize. And I think it's just probably a societal thing. When it's dark, we've been sort of trained that we should be asleep. One of my good friends is a psychiatrist and an integrative sleep doctor as well, but she also practices Ayurvedic medicine. So she has roots in India. And if you wake up in the middle of the night in India, right, it's sort of viewed as a sacred time, right? Those early morning hours where if you're awake, then you're going to start to meditate. Versus, I think in the US and maybe, Canada as well, you're like, oh crap, yeah. I'm up in the middle of the night. Something must be wrong with me. How do I get myself back to sleep? And then, oftentimes a lot of us grab our phones, and our phones have a lot of, positive and negative emotions and energy with it, right? Because if we work from our phones, it can be really stimulating. So really, breathing exercises are good. Try to be off your phone. Have a mantra. I think it's really helpful. is saying that, that can help relax you. I'm also trained in clinical hypnotherapy. So sometimes I think like helping patients walk through their happy place, right? When is it the time in your life where you were the most relaxed, right? Can you imagine yourself there in this moment? Is it a vacation? Is it, being back in your childhood home, right? Where, you didn't have to worry about anything. So yeah, visualizations can help. During the daytime, if you're a person that tends to have a lot of ruminating thoughts, one of the best techniques from cognitive behavioral therapy is to set aside a time just to worry, right? Sometimes they're not necessarily worrying thoughts. Sometimes they're just busy thoughts. Like, I got this meeting, I got to do this homework, I have to go to the grocery store. So can you set aside maybe 5-10 minutes a day, maybe after dinner, where you're just writing all the things down where you have to do the following day? And the more you practice this, the easier it gets. So if your brain says, oh, the grocery store tomorrow and it's 11, you're trying to sleep, guess what? Like, oh, wait, I already focused on that. I already wrote it down. So your brain will have to sort of, okay, close that door and focus on the next thing, which ideally should be sleep. So can you take away those busy thoughts away during the daytime? And I would say, yeah, but always easier said than done. So it's a practice, it's a skill that sometimes you just have to learn. Yeah, just like going to the gym, right? Doing some bicep curls or shoulder presses. What are the relaxation techniques that I can build up and practice where, okay, wake up to the bathroom because I just had too much water. I was so thirsty because I had, this really good Chinese food and it's always so salty and I just need to drink water. But now that I'm up the middle of the night, okay, I got these 3 things that I can do. I can go to my happy place, I can do a breathing exercise, or I can do like a body scan meditation. Yeah.
Very cool. And so you have a new course that you're coming out with that specifically helps with this. Do you have hypnosis in it?
That is a good question. So I talked to my lawyer about that, and he said that hypnosis, depending on the states that you're in, can be sort of misconstrued as therapy, and I can't be providing therapy. So I'm sharing my screen now, if you can see. It's a 4-week course. It's called the Serene Sleep Solution, and it's really educational. I am thinking that I will add in some like breathing exercises or maybe fill in the blank, like a Mad Lib, where you can come up with your own hypnotherapy script. But I think like the way I do it with my clinical practice is I guide someone through their perfect day. Whatever that is, who you're with, what are you eating? And then at the end of the day, you end up in this wonderful bedroom that's just super cozy and comfortable and just for you. And then you add in a lot of positive imagery. Like once you put your head on the pillow, you can fall asleep as long as you need. It's so easy for you to fall asleep. There's no worry in the world. Yeah, and it usually works pretty well. But yeah, through my course, at least unless I find a different lawyer who says it's okay, it's considered therapy. So, I mean, I can keep things generic. I can call it like guided imagery. I mean, there's so much different types of mind-body practices online. But what I think is best about clinical hypnotherapy, when I do it, it's individualized for, the person that I'm working with. So, this 4-part module, the first part is all about sort of the definitions. What is perimenopause? What is sleep? How does your brain work? Talking a little bit more in detail about that stress response, relaxation response. Mindset is so huge. Sometimes I have people who come in and they just tell me I'm a bad sleeper, like I suck at sleeping. Like, no, like sleep is not like a moral thing, right? Like, and one of them was, a girl who she would sleep, but she would sleep at like 4 or 5. And her mom like hated it, right? Because, it's viewed as lazy. But I'm like, okay, if you take a look at the amount of sleep that you're getting enough sleep. It's just delayed, right? It's that night owl person and their family wants them to live a day person's life, which some people, I sort of encourage you don't have to change your sleep cycle. If you can just find a job where you work at night, I mean, it's perfectly normal. So you're not a bad sleeper, right? So get that out of like your vocabulary. You're just a night owl and your mom wants you to be a day person. So
you're going to move to Europe and work remote.
Yeah, it was that easy, but by the time you move there, your body clock still shifts. So it doesn't it doesn't stick. So yeah, it would be nice. I think it's helpful for a couple of days, but then your body will change. Yeah. So yeah, the first module, just sort of learning the foundation about, menopause, perimenopause, and sleep. And then the second one sort of dives in deep to the wheel that I showed you, right? So all the sleep disruptors, learning about all the sleep conditions. And then I think what's really helpful is I will, teach people how to do a personal health sleep assessment, right? Encourage people to be like a scientist and take a look at it from a scientific approach, like how I would see them if they were in my own practice. Because a lot of times it's, I think someone will know what's wrong with them, but they don't always give themselves the time and space to understand. And especially, right, if you're someone who's on, social media where you go on and it's, I can't sleep. And it's like, okay, let's match this pill to something that can help you. But it's like, okay, what pill is going to help you if you like hate your job and it's just, boring?
Yes.
Because you've done the same thing for like 30 years of your life and you really want to be a chef or something and you're doing accounting. So like, I don't know. I mean, I think there's pills that can help stabilize the mood, but it's like understanding like your own core values. And so that's why, I like to describe my practice, my program, as like the holistic. You take a look at the mind, body, and soul approach. Yeah. And so the third module, we'll look at all the different types of treatment. So treating hot flashes, treating insomnia, and then all, looking into those mind body practices, right? The body scan, going to your happy space, talking about different breathing exercise. I mean, we will talk about supplements and aromatherapy because I think people do like that. But I think to think of them as helpers, right? So yeah, they definitely have their place. But I mean, if you've tried everything available at your, local drugstore and then, at the herbal store and you still can't sleep, it's not the pill, right? Yeah, something a little bit higher up. And then the last section, the last week is sort of a reflection, a review of everything that you learned then, and then creating your ideal sleep routine. And then, sort of maintenance. Yeah. But typically, most people start, I like to think I'm very optimistic, after the first week or two, once someone realizes why they can't sleep, right? Maybe they just have to cut out their Chinese food so they're not having to drink so much water to wake up in the middle of the night, right? Or sometimes they're just, they should cut the decaf in the afternoon instead of have another iced tea, iced coffee. Yeah. So some of those play a role. But then I think what takes me a little bit longer is if someone has anxiety and they don't know how to like break that spiral at night. There's definitely a lot of good techniques, but yeah, it just takes, I think, some education and then some accountability around that. Yeah. So that's my 4-week program called the Serene Sleep Solution.
So I think people should definitely be commenting in the video below with what their sleep issues are, and that way
so the first is, right, are you having a hard time falling asleep or staying asleep? And then do a sleep diary. Take a look at, are you getting enough exercise? Are you getting enough sunlight? What are you eating? Are you moving your body? Yeah, what are you eating and when? Yeah, specifically, alcohol and caffeine. And I think that's a good place to start. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time today and kind of going over all of this, because people need to know when they should go seek professional help, because I mean, I've run into a variety of different people at this point where, they tell me that they have sleep apnea, or they tell me that they just like the noise canceling piece of the headphones from our sleep bands have changed their life and allowed them to get 4 hours of sleep now. But like, really trying to help people understand that, it might be mindfulness, right? Or it might be something completely different that they need to go take a look at. And that's really what the point of all these are, is helping people find that person that maybe it's the sleep test for, what happens as far as sleep apnea, and and really getting to the root of what your sleep issues are.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that's a good distinction to make. So most days I live in the world of medical sleep conditions. So, some of the things that I talk about may not necessarily be for everybody, right? So know if you're the worried well versus someone who actually has a medical condition. And if you don't know, right, and if you tried a bunch of things and you're still tired, definitely talk to your doctor about it, right? And then if they can't help you, ask to see a sleep specialist. Yeah. Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, we'll be
I didn't know I could love something this much until I laid my eyes on you. I didn't know I could love something this much until I laid